Hello and welcome to this week's Politics Society podcast from Bournemouth University. Today we'll be discussing the deadly terror attack that occurred yesterday in the French city of Nice that saw 3 people killed. Also on today's show, with only a few days to go until the 59th US presidential election, we'll be discussing our predictions ahead of what will be an interesting night. But first, yesterday a damning report by the Equality and Human Rights Commission found that the Labour Party had unlawfully discriminated against Jewish members. Labour has been found guilty of 3 charges of breaching equalities law, the unlawful harassment of Jewish members through the acts of Ken Livingstone and Pam Bromley, and indirect discrimination relating to political interference in the handling of antisemitism complaints, as well as a lack of adequate training. The EHRC has launched its investigation into Labour in May last year after a referral from the Jewish Labour movement. The Commission conducted an analysis of 70 complaints, 58 they chose themselves and 12 were put forward as examples of the party. So far, Sir Keir Starmer has come out and fully supported the decision to suspend Corbyn after the former Labour leader, in response to the report, stated that the problem has been dramatically overstated for political reasons, and he'll strongly contest the decision. So, Aaron, what do we think of that?
Well, I think first of all, it kind of shows why people aren't particularly fans of Jeremy Corbyn right now. He seems kind of completely out of it in terms of, out of touch, really. I saw a YouGov poll saying that over 48% of people supported the decision, and less than 20% didn't, and the others don't know. So, it kind of shows that he's kind of siding against the general populace. What's good is that it shows strong leadership from Keir Starmer, though it may have some bad effects in Labour as the division between the far left and the moderate left grows even wider.
So do you think overall it was the right decision to suspend him from the party? And also, it wasn't actually Keir Starmer who did that. It was the General Secretary of the Labour Party, as Keir Starmer doesn't actually have the power to do so. But obviously, Keir Starmer's come out and supported and pledged allegiance with the party. So do you think it was the right decision?
I think so there's 2 ways to think about this. If you're Labour, first of all, the leadership was run by Jeremy Corbyn, and his leadership and tenureship has been painted by this damning report. So therefore, he's almost damaged goods when it comes to the Labour Party. So I think that's probably the perspective that they went from, especially with his response. I think most importantly, on the other side, it could cause a lot of people on the far left to either go to the Green Party or possibly start an entire new party due to the dissatisfaction, which though Labour may next gain more votes in the next year election with Keir Starmer and obviously Boris Johnson not particularly being too popular right now. I think that what it will do is it may lose them small amounts of votes that are crucial in the first past the post system.
So, but do you not think that the Labour Party can claw back some of the voters that left Labour in the previous election due to the anti-Semitic claims, but now perhaps with Starmer's leadership they can progress and go forward from here and leave the past behind them?
Yeah, like I said, they're probably going to get a net gain of votes from this. And generally they're getting a lot of gains because despite the fact, and this is the most interesting thing, despite the fact that Keir Starmer was the Brexit shadow secretary for Labour and kind of was seen as the one of the main Remain forces within Labour, his poll ratings have extensively increased, which deeply suggests that Brexit wasn't the main reason why Labour failed so much, which is what people were claiming at the time. And I don't particularly think too many people, also in areas such as Chipping Barnet, where the Conservatives held on, for sure that's going to have an impact. But I don't think it's going to have as much of an impact as I don't think too many people voted against Labour specifically due to anti-Semitism. What it's more likely to do is turn off people from that supported Jeremy Corbyn, the Iron Abbott supporters, etc., who may in turn, possibly if Corbyn starts a new party, move to his party, which would be very interesting to see how the makeup of the parliament would therefore be.
Yeah, I agree. I think Keir Starmer's come out and said it's not a time for civil war, with reference to the chaos that Corbyn implied that will happen as a result of the commission and the suspension. So instead, Starmer's called for unity in the party. So I don't know. The questions that are raised are like, is the party credible now? Can it move forward from this? Do you think that Keir Starmer is the right man to carry them through? At the minute, he's made a very clear message to the electorate that he will not tolerate any anti-Semitic behaviour, even if you're denying it, because that's what a big problem with Corbyn's leadership was. He was just denying the actual the problem almost existed, and it was just I think the words he used were an exaggerated. It's been overstated and exaggerated, and that is not what the voters want. The voters want clarity. They want a decision to be made, and I think Keir Starmer has been bold in making this move. Obviously, not by him again, by the General Secretary, but him supporting it so explicitly. I think it's better to keep Corbyn in the past, move on, leave him behind, remove the stigma from the party, and see if Labour can actually contest maybe the next election or the election after that.
Well, reality, this is currently a mixture between wins and losses, because already the Conservatives are kind of spinning this as the Keir Starmer was Corbyn's man. They have clips of him saying, in 2019, I support Jeremy Corbyn wholeheartedly, right? Which you, as a member of the cabinet, let's not forget, you have to do, even if privately you don't, due to collective responsibility. A lot of people contest whether that's actually good, but nevertheless, I think what the most interesting thing is whether how much race and kind of prejudice has an effect on the electorate. Because we've seen Trump win in 2016, where a lot of people say he's a white supremacist sympathizer. In 2020, Biden or Trump, because Biden, let's not forget, Biden has made some very dodgy statements in terms.
Yeah, he's not whiter than white, is he? Yeah, he does have a questionable past.
You have Brexit, which a lot of people kind of, though I personally don't necessarily say this, but a lot of people have deemed it as a xenophobic thing to vote for. So here's the true question: how much of an impact did anti-Semitism really have? Though it's good for publicity, the fact that Labour have expelled him and are kind of trying to draw a line, especially when it comes to attacks and the moral high ground. But similarly, it's going to help them with the Jewish community in marginal seats like Chipping Barnet. I think with the general electorate, it's not going to be the biggest impact. I think the biggest impact is going to be more sensible policies. Boris Johnson, let's not forget, Conservatives and Boris Johnson hasn't clothed themselves with glory in terms of being accused of various things like Islamophobia.
Yeah.
So I've just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Yeah. So in general working class areas, I don't particularly think it's going to have an impact. What's more going to have an impact is the policies, the character of what type of leader he's going to be, and whether he's a strong presence.
Yeah, I would argue that him coming out yesterday and this morning. I don't know if you saw his speech this morning, but it was incredible. And a lot of comments and critics have already come out and said that this speech will go down in history, comparing it to Tony Blair and his removal of the socialist policy from his manifesto and from the Labour Party programme kind of thing. In terms of the history of the Labour Party, that this will be recognised as a movement that Keir Starmer has kind of started, representing how he'll go forward in his leadership, making bold moves and really challenging, because whether it's within his party or without, in terms of opposing the Conservatives, I think the fact that he's got the strength to do that in his own party just shows what kind of leader he will be from the outset, I think.
Here's the biggest issue of Keir Starmer, and this isn't an issue with him as a leader or his policies. The issue is the fact that he's got 207 seats, right?
Mm.
And in history, no one's got a majority in Parliament from that far back. Right, the closest person to getting a majority is David Cameron. This is since 1945, for reference. But David Cameron was the closest at 306, coming back from around 190-ish, right?
Yeah.
So, despite the fact that he's gained all this popularity, he's so far back, he would have to genuinely break history to become Prime Minister, or he'd have to go into a coalition with someone like the SNP, which is likely, but that would then create a breakup of the union, which in turn gives an advantage for the Conservative Party, because then England is dominated by the Conservatives when they are near power, and with growing popularity of the Conservatives in Wales, especially considering what's happening with Wales at the moment and the complete car crash that's going on with that government.
Yeah.
That could have long-standing implications. Keir Starmer said that if the SNP win the next election in Holyrood, that they have a legitimate claim for a second independence referendum, and if they win that, in the long term, that's going to screw over Labour, because since Thatcher, with Tony Blair, and even predating that with Wilson, they very much need Scotland to win a majority. So that's going to truly be the interesting way it's going to turn out in the future.
Yeah, and whether or not voters will look at the competency of Johnson's government in dealing with the pandemic, as well as the end of the transition period with Brexit in the coming months as well. So there's a lot to look forward to, and a few more years yet until an election, until we can really see the benefits of Keir Starmer's leadership.
Despite this being the most unforgettable time currently with COVID, in 4 years' time, this is going to be forgotten. Like, there's going to be so many more pressing news stories. Johnson, I don't even know if he's going to be Prime Minister by the time of the next election. He's a very polarizing person. He got a lot of support and a lot of will from the 2019 election. I feel like very quickly there's been a lot of dismay between the backbenchers with his government, and especially certain ministers in his government.
Yeah, but I'd argue that the economic impact of the pandemic and the links to the healthcare implications as well will have long-term consequences for years to come. So, and I think that people in small communities, in vulnerable communities that work for the NHS, work in the healthcare, workers, key workers, I don't see how they would be able to forget in the next few years something so dramatic that's happened in their line of work and in their family life. And I think it's very easy to blame government of the day for the mishandling of the issue, especially everyone keeps saying unprecedented times and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see, because you think that people have short memories kind of thing and might forget. They might do, but also no one knows when this will end. This could go on for another few years. Let's hope not. But
here's the thing. First of all, healthcare professionals statistically vote Conservative. They haven't done for the longest time, and they probably will continue not to. So I don't think the Conservatives are going to be ruined over that. But the main thing is that, yes, you're completely right about it's going to have lasting impacts. If the Conservatives are able to have a good recovery from the economic impacts and all this, then people will forget the mishandling of it at this stage. Whether it has even been mishandling, but people are perceiving it currently to be, will they then perceive it in hindsight as being as not as bad as people make it out to be. And I'm linking this because everyone's saying in Trump, he's mishandled it, 200,000 people are dead. But there were projections. If you remember that press conference where he came out with, talking about the projections of which could happen, this was very much a best case scenario for him. So the question is that will hindsight 2020 vision have an impact on how people perceive it after they're out of it?
Yeah, I think, well, you mentioned there, because Sage have come out yesterday and said that their predictions of the worst case scenario have happened, and that we're in terms of looking to the future, the inevitable, like another national lockdown in the UK. You see France doing it. Will that happen? It doesn't look good in terms of the way we're going at the moment, with more and more towns and cities going into tier 3 in the UK. And Sage did come out yesterday and said that our worst case scenario, this has exceeded it for autumn. So we'll see what happens, but we shall move on to speak about the appalling knife attack in Nice yesterday. Thousands of extra troops are being deployed in France in the wake of the attack, where a man armed with a knife beheaded a woman and killed 2 other people at the Notre Dame church in the city of Nice. Hours later, police killed a man who threatened passers-by with a handgun just outside the French city of Avignon. And in Saudi Arabia, a man was arrested after attacking and injuring a guard at the French consulate in Jeddah. This attack comes after 2 weeks after Samuel Paty, a history teacher, was also beheaded by an 18-year-old Chechen outside of Paris. And it's not looking good for French politics at the minute. A lot of Muslims have come out and kind of challenged the Charlie Hebdo cartoons as well, of the Prophet during the lesson of freedom of expression. The Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has written about the cultural clashes between the Western and Islamic world, condemning Emmanuel Macron for linking Thursday's attack to Islam. He says Muslims have a right to be angry and to kill millions of French people for the massacres of the past, in a post that was subsequently removed by Twitter. Terrible what's happened. What do you think, Aaron? How do France go on from this? It's becoming quite a theme now in French politics.
Well, I think first of all, what we need to do is we need to say, our thoughts and our condolences to the families of the people that are dead. And we wish them all the best in their grief, because it doesn't matter if this is an Islamic attack or whatever. It's a heinous attack, no matter what. Truly, no regard for human life, and it's truly horrific. I think that there's some degree to be positive about, in that there was a lot of Muslims coming out condemning the attack, which I think is a very important thing. I think Mesut Ozil, prime example, he's a high-profile person coming out and saying, he used to quote from the Quran about killing innocent life. So yeah. I think we have to respect them, especially for standing up against this, which was, though not Islamic in principle, was in the name of unfortunately of Islam, and done in that regard. I think that the comments by the Malaysian Prime Minister are completely despicable. As much as we can all agree that there are certainly cultural differences between Islamic and Western civilizations, and no one's going to deny that. But I think that, because people always say that people are calling to violence. That is a direct call to violence, and I don't think that should particularly be, accepted or particularly be agreed.
Normalised. I completely agree. The French Interior Minister has come out and said, "We are in war against an enemy that is both inside and outside." we need to understand that there have been and that there will be other events such as these terrible attacks. So with a look to the future there, an ominous look to the future, it doesn't look good. So Macron is coming under fierce criticism, and there have been boycotts of French goods in several Muslim countries. And obviously, where it really peaked was in 2015, where two brothers killed 12 people, and all surrounding the Charlie Hebdo, the satirical magazine in which caricatures of Prophet Muhammad have appeared. Yeah, it's not good. And what the Australian Prime Minister has done today and yesterday is come out and condemned anything, condemned the attack. He said that's the first thing, as you rightly say, the first thing that you should be doing. He's condemned the Malaysian Prime Minister's views, describing them as abhorrent, which I'm sure most people will agree with. Yeah, it doesn't look good. And what more policing to solve in terms of how a look to how you can de-radicalize. I don't know. Is that the problem? Is the problem there?
I think what we don't want is we don't want a police state. I think that's the most important thing, is that removing COVID, I think that generally we want to live our lives as we want to live our lives, and I don't particularly think, though we should be wary, I don't think it's good to, especially for the government, to promote fear, in which I think some politicians may induce in the coming future. But I think that here's the problem, is that there is nothing greater force than an idea and a philosophy, and it's not something you can kill, because once a philosophy is created and written, it can be translated and brought down from thousands of years, which is how, you still have, despite multiple countries failing under the system, you still have Marxism, because of the principled idea rather than practice. And I think that because of that, it's not particularly something we can expel, especially when it's already there within the country. He said it's in and out of France. I think what you really need to do is possibly try to, I don't know, because my basic principle is the government shouldn't particularly be blocking things. Information should be out there. And they shouldn't particularly be infringing on personal rights. But really, if you want to stop this, and without trying to kill them all before anything happens, or just because you can't particularly de-radicalize, it's not very easy. You kind of have to do that and infringe on people's personal rights. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think well, Macron said that he'd double the security forces to 7,000 new policemen to protect the churches. He's voiced support for the Catholic Church, which I think is right, but that's also the bare minimum that he can do. I think there's a lot to be said for public condemnation and also education. I think education is the way forward in terms of getting to the root of the issue, because it is an issue, but it also exists outside of France. It exists all over the world. As I said, the Saudi man was arrested yesterday as well for attacking a guard, and it's not good for French politics, and it's very easy to kind of criticise Macron, but I don't think that's where the anger should be blamed. I think kind of an impartial look at things and take a step back and to kind of side with the victims and their loved ones and show signs of solidarity with them is the way forward, as opposed to more anger, more hatred, more vilification, more polarization of politics, and using religion in that, and the two interrelated issues are so intertwined in today's world, that it can be it is a very complicated issue. So yeah.
There's only one thing that I have to say about that, because I agree with you in a lot of what you said. But the main thing is, when it comes to education, I think that education certainly is a vital thing. But when people are subject to propaganda and indoctrination, it's difficult because of the psychological effects. It's like when not saying that this is that, but when someone's in a cult, it's very difficult for them to get out of it because of the indoctrination and the extent that they pummel you with the ideas and the hatred and the emotions. That it usually takes people who've come out of that to get them out, because of how much, because they understand, they can sympathize with what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. So I think that's the main challenge of it, is if you want to de-radicalize, it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, no, I do agree. The solution, it takes years. It will be it's a long term, but it doesn't just fix overnight. There's no policy that can solve it. There's anomalies in it in every case. But to be fair, where I'm concerned is the fact that a lot of what I've read has focused on the fact that he was a Tunisian illegal immigrant, and the fact that that's a very dangerous almost headline, because it has caught the headlines, and the vilification of immigration and immigrants and people seeking refuge and coming out of awful situations, and that will just only, I would say, inspire what is already, in terms of outsider politics, the look to shut your borders and close everything off and treat immigrants with distaste, which I think could be quite dangerous, but we'll see.
I think for certain within the last, shall we say, 10 years, there's a growing amount of hostility towards immigration, but not only just immigration. I think about what immigration represents, which is globalization in general.
Yeah.
I think that especially, no one's specifically stating that immigration is a terrible thing. It's the extent of it, and it's the legality of certain people. So I think I completely agree with you that it's going to spark more people and kind of back up more people's ideas on that, which could be a dangerous thing, especially because we've just seen, illegal immigrants unfortunately drowning in the channel, being a channel. So the question is how, because I know people who are very anti, especially like blindly against it, I'd say. I don't know the impact it's going to have. I think it's truly going to back them up. But what's important is that we balance it with showing, successful people, not just illegal, but mainly, legal immigrants who have come down, so that hostility towards them especially doesn't reach boiling point.
Yeah, I agree. Right, on to the final topic. We'll move away from European politics and talk about what's going on across the pond. What is it? 4 days till the US election?
Well, to the polls close. Who knows when the actual results will come out?
So we'll see what happens. It will be exciting. There's, the closer you get, I've been reading the more news that Trump could pull out a surprise victory, or that you can never underestimate Trump, and the amount of headlines that I can see this week, with everyone kind of saying, Trump could still do it, here's how he can win, whereas you get it 2 weeks ago and all the news was Biden's surging in the polls. So it's very different week to week, and US election, you don't know what to read. Where do you start?
Here's the thing, is I'm actually one of the people, and this is my general, I think Trump's going to win. And I'll tell you exactly why I think Trump's going to win. And I know this is a very controversial and hot take, but here's my evidence. This first one, Vigo County, okay? Vigo County is a county in Indiana, and it has been wrong since it existed in every election twice. Last election, it went Republican. In 2012, despite Indiana going Democrat, going Republican, it went Democrat. Okay. And there's people who are experts on this county who are Democrats and Republicans saying that they think it's going to swing to Republicans. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're saying it's tight. They are, the Democrats are fearful of this because they think it's likely to happen, which means either Vigo County is going to be for the third time wrong, or it's going to continue its massive streak, which hasn't been broken since 1956, I think I read. Okay. Second piece of evidence is obviously there's a lot of polling coming out. I think there's very much ridiculous polling. There's people saying that Biden's going to win Florida by 8 to 10%. Like you have to have no understanding of Florida politics to know that no candidate is going to win by 8%, especially in these times. We talk about Florida with 2000 when there was that giant lawsuit in 2012 where it was like a couple of thousand between Romney and Obama. Like, it's always tight.
Yeah.
So I don't particularly trust a lot of the polls, but there's one polling group called Trafalgar. Now, this polling group is the same polling group that the only one who predicted that Trump would take Michigan and Pennsylvania in 2016.
Yeah.
And the 2018 midterms, they predicted 7 out of the 9 key races, and was one of the highest predictors and people have stated that they were the most accurate during that midterm. And there, once again, despite a couple of months ago saying that Biden was going to take Michigan, have now stated that Trump's going to take Michigan. And if you calculate all the polls that they're doing, kind of inferring what that's going to mean for other states, because they don't poll every state, but they poll a lot of the key ones, that would instigate a Trump victory by a smaller margin, but a Trump victory. And the parallels to 2016 are uncanny. I saw, a week ago, if you compare the key states' average polling, it's actually smaller for Biden than it was for Clinton. And now you have this FBI investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden for money laundering, which parallels Hillary Clinton's emails.
It was always going to happen. The October surprise, it was always going to happen.
Yeah.
I said it. There was Trump will pull out all the stops to avoid losing. It's the kind of person he is. He's defiant in that, and he embraces it as well. But he will use that to his advantage. I've been tentative to call a Biden victory this whole time, and I still am. I don't like saying it because I don't want to jinx it, and I'm not superstitious in the slightest. But I feel nervous to say that I think Biden will win, just because of the of the problems that could arise with another 4 years of Trump. I don't think it would be healthy for Western democracy. I don't think Western democracy could survive another Trump term, to be fair.
I don't know if Western democracy is going to demise too much with another 4 years of Trump. But I don't particularly think it's demised in the last 4 years. This is my personal opinion. But I predicted Trump was going to win before I even came to uni in 2018. Just because I knew for a fact that if he ran, Biden was going to be the person selected. Just because they weren't going to go with Bernie or Warren, because the Democrats, they did it in 2016. They're going to make sure they don't cover. It's going to be an establishment Democrat. And, recently we've got this whole massive Brexit movement, which is Democrat voting African Americans who are fed up of the Democrats, and I feel like their lives have gotten better with the plans. I mean, Lil Wayne, just like yesterday or the day before, was photographed with Trump with a meeting, saying he's going to support him. 50 Cent said he was going to support Trump, though he went back on that. Who knows whether that's due to the backlash? You
Yeah.
know, Joe Rogan, who's got probably the most popular podcast, said on multiple times anyone but Biden.
Mm.
Because as much as Biden is, you know, you can talk about his political career previously, currently right now, his cognitive ability is reduced. You know, Trump just released the ad "Spot a Zombie,"
Yeah.
talking about, you know, Biden, the fact that you know, he recently just called the president George Bush.
Yeah. Yeah. But then, in terms of referring to competence and sanity of mind, you can't. The amount of examples that you could pick out with Trump.
When I say this, I'm not saying Trump's this amazing candidate
No,
who's
no, of
glorified,
course, of course.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, the thing that Joe Rogan, and I'm going to say that this isn't my opinion, but this is what Joe Rogan says, is that he thinks the guy's got dementia at the end of the day, and I think that is something that a lot of people are thinking. So my opinion.
It's all conspiratorial. It's all conspiratorial thinking and the rise. And this is what when I mean democracy and Western democracy, I mean the undermining of institutions and the lack of like consensus and truth has just been completely blown out the window with Trump. And he's perpetuated that from the most important role in the world in world politics. He's been the one that has discredited the postal service. Like more than 80 million Americans have already cast their ballot via mail, voting in person this year, which far surpasses 2016's numbers. But I do worry about another term with Trump, and I still think that Biden. And the polls that I've read, Ipsos, Reuters, he's still, and yeah, polls are polls, of course they are. But they still predict him to. I know in Florida it says 2 points ahead. Pennsylvania 5.7. Ohio, Trump's just squeezing, but is a very fine margin. Michigan 7% up. North Carolina 2. Arizona 3. Wisconsin 7.7, and Iowa is just a small margin ahead as well. So it will be interesting to see what happens, and I think that Kamala Harris as well on the presidential ticket it'll be very interesting to see the black vote and how it shapes out, and also the Hispanic vote as well. I wonder how they've been mobilized, especially with the pandemic affecting hospitality, and we know that a large proportion of the hospitality are Hispanic workers.
You cut out there for a second, you kind of froze. So if you just want to repeat what you said.
I was just saying a large proportion of the Hispanic community have jobs in hospitality, which have been largely affected by the pandemic. So it will be interesting to see the overriding themes and how they play out come Tuesday.
Well, yeah. If I may comment, which is, first of all, I think Kamala Harris is going to damage Biden's ticket. And the reason I say this is because she was polling below 5% for presidential race. You know, she sponsors the Green New Deal, which, you know, a lot of people like, but a lot of people loathe, especially with the amount of money it costs. Yes, for sure, the Latino community and Hispanic is going to be impacted by the lockdowns. But who's currently arguing for lockdowns? Biden, not Trump. So I think that's going to play. And I mean, a lot of people thought that the Latinos vote was going to go massively towards Clinton, and it didn't. It was, you know, it increased compared to Mitt Romney and John McCain for Trump. And I think that, you know, when it came to election night in 2016, they were saying, poll-wise, they were saying similar things about Clinton, you know. They had, if you look at, for example, CNN's election, they had on the day prediction or polling of, you know, what was going on. They had all the Rust Belt states except for Ohio in the Hillary Clinton's column. In the end, that didn't quite work out. You know, they were kind of saying that the main ones that were kind of, you know, key races were Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and maybe Iowa. I think Iowa was red, but I think so. Yes, polling is like that, but 538 has been wrong in the midterms and the last election. I'm not going to start trusting them right now. Just like in the last election, I didn't trust the polls for in 2019. I was got a lot of criticism from people because I was saying that I think it's going to be around 330 with the Conservatives, and it may even be hung just because of the just my personal gut feeling. But in the end, the initial polls were correct, and it was that large. So they could be. It's just currently they have to earn my trust, and they haven't done that in the last cycle. So
I think polling in general over the past few years, you look all across with the Brexit vote, and you look at elections as well. It has not done it's not covered itself in glory. And yeah, you can pick and choose because there's always going to be that one poll that predicted what nobody else thought, and then they were the correct. But that isn't necessarily the case in terms of polling and trust in general. It is definitely decreased. But whether or not the American voters, because that's who that matters, they're the people that will decide the election. Who they will choose and who they'll vote for will ultimately decide how America will go forward for the next 4 years. And at the minute, the coronavirus couldn't have come at a worse time for Trump. I think his slow reaction and the fact that he discredited international organisations, the scientific community in general, and evidence-based thinking, he denied and came out and said some stupid things that were then discredited. And I believe that will only serve to do him badly in a few days' time.
I agree that's not, he did say some stupid things, but I think that the way that he's dealt with it, with the debates, especially talking about, China and how we closed the border, and Biden repetitively said that it was the wrong decision when it turned out to be the right decision. I think that the way that him and Pence in the vice presidential debate dealt with those questions and those critiques and kind of swung it, I think is going to limit the damage that it could have caused.
It will, I don't think, but I'd say the challenge in terms of the presidential debates, I'd say Biden and Harris, all they had to do to win the debates was not do anything dramatic, not to make a scene of anything. And I don't believe that in either one of the debates that anything substantial, there was no winners, no real losers. And I believe that actually served the Democrats better. I'd say that they didn't come out and make a fool of themselves, nor did they particularly make a fool of Trump or Pence. And I'd say it kind of, in terms of spikes and troughs and in voting, I don't think the election will be decided by the debates at all.
I agree with that. It probably won't be decided from the debates, but the reason why I bring up the debates is because that's kind of the line that Trump's doing. Yeah. And because unlike Biden, Trump is going out and having these massive rallies. Every day I always see, Trump rally in Wisconsin or Arizona or Florida or wherever. And Biden isn't really doing that. He's doing smaller or just press stuff. And I'm interested to see if that's going to have an impact.
It is interesting because arguably that represents rationality. It represents cautiousness. It represents everything that a president should be encouraging. But president of this time.
On the other side, it represents talking to the people.
It does, but you can do. Yeah, it does, but you can. The sensible thing for a president, and you meant to lead by example, as the famous saying goes. You cannot be doing. You cannot be preaching. Imagine if Johnson was going around like holding rallies, and the UK media, the UK public, who are arguably less exposed to, institutional decline and evidence-based thinking than the US, it will be an uproar. And the fact that Trump can do that in America and kind of go immune to any damage shows how bad the state is and how much they need an overhaul of thinking, because I'd say it's only going one way. And as I say, another 4 years of Trump, I don't know whether America can survive it, actually.
Well, I listened to a very interesting thing, was that America was created with distrust, right, in the British rule. So being distrustful of what people are telling you is intrinsic to them, which is why you have all these people like anti-vaxxers and all this stuff. So I don't know if I don't think that's ever changed and ever been.
I would say that it's peaked. I'd say that Trump has perpetuated and has encouraged QAnon conspiratory thinking, which have caused like attacks. That there have been disastrous events that have arguably been, well, very closely associated to a Trump speech or a Trump rally or something. So I don't necessarily think that's good for the well-being of American citizens. It will be interesting to see how the Electoral College, because obviously Clinton won the popular vote in 2016.
Biden will win the popular vote no matter what. Though I'm saying Trump's going to win, Biden will win the popular vote. Here's the entire reason why Clinton won, was because the popular vote, it's because California went 75% to them, and that's got like twice the amount of electoral votes as like the majority of states. So the population is so astronomically large. If you get 75%, and also this happened in New York as well, which is the joint second most electoral highest votes. And again, once you win like that, you're going to win the popular vote just by how the nature of it is. So that's personally why I'm in favour of the Electoral College, because it kind of gives smaller states an ability to have a say. But, so because of that, Biden probably will win the popular vote, but he won't. I don't think he's going to win the Electoral College. I think don't get me wrong, it's going to be close. He could just swing it, but
do you not think? Could you not foresee a landslide victory for either one? No. You think it would be a tight, close horse race?
Well, it depends how you okay. What it comes down to, I think that all the evidence would suggest Trump's going to win Florida, not because of Trump being specifically better, is that Florida has slightly been leaning towards the Republican Party. We saw in the midterms they won the governor and the senator. In 2016 they won the senator and the president, etc. Right? So that's a bit more towards him. I think he's going to swing North Carolina, just because I think North Carolina is going to go a bit further towards his roots. Probably going to win Ohio and Iowa, in my opinion. So I think it's really going to come down to, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, to really change how it's going to go. I don't think that at this stage the Democrats are at a state where they're going to take Texas. So I think a lot of people are saying, I don't think they're going to take Texas. I think in regard to Arizona, I think that they're in a position to make it close. I think Arizona is going to slightly go out towards the Republicans. Here's the thing that's always happened in American politics, is that a lot of people saying the Democrats are taking the southern states, right? Well, whenever someone makes ground in the South, they lose out in the North. The question is if the Democrats make gains in the South, are they going to lose out in the North?
There we go. All important questions, and we'll see what happens. We'll most likely be back with probably two episodes next week. One, a direct response to the election, analysing it, breaking it down, talk about who won, how they won, where it was important, and then also another weekly catch-up on Friday.
I will say that does depend highly on when the actual results come out.
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. No, we will see. We will wait and see. But we will be doing a US election special, I'm sure. Right. Well, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Finlay.
Well, no problem. Right, and we will see you next week.